I'm going to start off and ask Hayden. Hayden, could you tell us what a MEAP is for those people in the room that don't know what the alphabet soup is, so we can get this discussion started?
Sure thing. Okay. So as Maury says, I work with Motorola, and Motorola, you guys may know, is in the business of rugged handheld computers. Some of the other products that we work with are the two-way radios. So just about all the police and firemen that you see out there carry Motorola radios. That's another area of our business. But another area of our business that a lot of folks aren't aware of is the cellular infrastructure. Right? Most of the cell towers and the communications equipment on those cell towers is Motorola equipment as well. But beyond that, I'll talk about handheld computers for a second. That's kind of been our business. We've been focused on rugged mobile computers in the enterprise for umpteen years, from, like Maury says, when we were back in the days of Symbol. And so that's kind of where we spend a lot of our time, right, is understanding what goes on in the enterprise. Along that line, just lately, you've seen a lot of talk recently about what we'll call rich internet applications. And what they are applications that run on devices that communicate with some back-end cloud-based system. It basically takes the data off that cloud-based system, displays it in some cool, rich UI on the device. And when you talk about MEAPS, that's what we're talking about, is the platform that's used to develop those rich internet applications. A MEAP at its highest level consists of probably three different things, I would say. And probably you ask all three of us here and we give you a different answer on it. But when I think of MEAP, I think of the ability to do cross-platform. So write your application one time, but target multiple devices. The second one is data synchronization. Being able to have that application run in an offline fashion. If the internet's not there, the application's still going to function to some extent, right? So those you have those two things as being very important in when you describe what a MEAP is. But at its highest level, it's a mobile enterprise application platform, and it's really meant, it's a new paradigm in software development. It's probably the best way I can put it. Maury?
Thank you for that, Hayden. And the company I work for, Pyramid Consulting, we are doing work with RoMobile, and for example, we develop native code with it, and then we put it back through the system, and it comes out with another operating system native code. So I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but that's one of the real advantages of MEAP. So George, Catavolt, you're not a MEAP, so what are you, and what do you do, and tell us.
Thanks, Maury. So a MEAP is something that helps you build applications, and we're going to need to build a lot of applications over the years. So they're great, because you don't want to build it by hand. We do something a little bit different. When you go to the office and you use your systems, there's inventory, there's sales orders, there's all this great data that's out there that you'd love to get to from your mobile devices. But it's all over the place. It's in a traditional data center. What we did that was different than a MEAP was give you a cloud service that connects to your existing enterprise systems and makes them available from your mobile devices, all of them. And what's interesting about the market is we need everything, because there's so much use for mobile. So as we go through some of the mobile scenarios, you'll see that sometimes you have to build applications, other times you have to use something right off the shelf and you just download it. And then in certain other situations, there's a middle ground there.
So Lee, before I jump in and ask your question, I just want to test the audience here for a second. Who thinks that Apple has, as of February 2012, Apple has the largest percentage share of the smartphone space in the United States?
As an OS or as a brand?
As an OS, yes, as an OS. Number of units sold in the market. Okay, what about Android? Wow, we have a really smart audience. So Android has got about a 57% market share, according to ComScore, and Apple has about a 35% share. BlackBerry has dropped down to about a 7% share, and Microsoft is somewhere between 5 and 7%. Now, those numbers are a little bit misleading because if you look at on the enterprise side, the BlackBerry share is a lot higher just because of the legacy devices out there. Now, who can tell me how many apps there are in the Apple App Store these days? 585,000. This man's got it, 585,000. And that's probably yesterday, right? So today there's probably 650,000. So the reason I bring that up, to frame it up before I jump in and ask Lee a question, these enterprise apps, as you guys had said, that now it's exciting what Meryl said, that enterprise is where the money is and all this is happening. This is a technology that started on the consumer side. So I used to do Wi-Fi for Bell South. We saw it there. People were bringing Wi-Fi routers to work. Enterprises could care less about Wi-Fi. Bell South said, we have Ethernet ports in every room. What do we need Wi-Fi for? People were bringing Rogue Wi-Fi routers in. If you think about the original PC, it was driven by consumers. People brought MacBooks, the original Mac, to work. And they brought IBM PC Juniors and said, why can't I do this at work? So then we start using them as terminals, smart terminals. So here again, smartphones are being driven into the enterprise by consumers. And there's this movement on bring your own device to work that companies are embracing. It used to be you showed up, they handed you a BlackBerry, and you were done. And if it didn't run on BlackBerry, the enterprise didn't care about it. So that's why I bring up that Android is leading the market, and there are a lot of companies that won't allow them, but they're going to have to allow it. Ask you, what are you seeing out in the marketplace in your travels? What are some of the challenges that companies are facing with mobile application development? What kind of tools, MEAPS, whatever, are you seeing to combat this challenge?
Wasn't that Hayden's question? So we're out in the marketplace and we see big and small enterprises. I think there are kind of three common themes. The first is no one can compete with the rate of change. Right? The rate of change is greater than the capacity to deal with that rate of change. So you have to have something to be able to do it. And I think the second thing that's really important is you're seeing the need for different types of applications in the environment. It used to be fairly consistent where it was line of business, business to employee. Now you've got horizontal applications, you got consumer applications. Sometimes a consumer application is a PDE application. Sometimes it can be used. This data can be used for both. So I think the net of it is the change is moving extremely fast, and you need something that's going to keep that pace of change with you, because everybody individually can't keep pace with the change, right? So you have to do that. And the second is the lines are blurring about what is the type of app out there, and you need to be accommodating and flexible on how you deal with that, which creates the need for platforms, meat platforms, you can call them MEAPS in the consumer, but they're all platforms of some form or another that you need out there. And I'd say probably the last thing is the thing that happened with the internet kind of after the internet started was analytics. And I think whether it be your business to employee application or your business to consumer application, analytics and what you're pulling off the data and who's using it, and how does that UI affect the usability of it and the UX. Those things are people that are struggling with right now. So we have two clients that have changed their whole paradigm, and they say, I'm going to develop mobile first because it's the easiest to use, and then I'm going to retrofit that back to my internet application because then they'll be easier to use. So those would be the top three.
Well, that's really interesting, and it begs the point that you can't just take the internet and put it on a small screen. That you have to develop for the little screen. The people, they carry it around, it's with them. You've got to take advantage of that, the GPS, and it's got to be short bits of information. When you're staring at a screen, you have a lot of time. When somebody's looking at something on a cell phone, they don't. To frame up a little bit of what Lee said, this great point, what would you not use a MEAP for?
Okay, all right. That's That's a pretty good question. I like that. A MEAP in general is it's a rapid application development tool, right? So it operates at a very high level. As a developer, one of the things that I kind of say to myself is, you know, because I'm a developer and I like to tinker, I like trying to be an expert in the operating system that I work with. The problem is I don't get paid to be that expert, right? I get paid as an application developer, I get paid to write business logic and get applications out the door quickly. And that's kind of where a MEAP focuses, right? It focuses on delivering that solution, getting it out the door quickly, not having to be concerned with the underlying operating system, be concerned with the underlying device.
Okay, George, is there anything that Catavolt doesn't work for?
We don't do Windows. No, sorry.
That's coming soon.
No, well, I mean, let's talk about the market in general. There's the mid-market customers that just want to get the data out to their employees and they want to enjoy the efficiencies. And to them, building an application is just not, you know, it's not even a possibility. So enabling those kinds of companies is very important in the market. And then, you know, you talked about Home Depot and what Macy's would do and things, companies of that nature, and building an app to them is just a natural thing. So I think you could take a MEAP and do just about anything with it because it's a development environment. With Catavolt, you would just mobilize employees and business partners to get them the data they need at the time of need. But what's interesting, sorry to go off on a tangent, I was just thinking
It's okay.
while you were talking for 5 minutes there. But
I get paid by the minute.
okay. But no, what's interesting is we're doing this cloud innovation where it used to be, who used to build apps? You know, developers, maybe developers of big companies. But now with the different tools, everybody's building apps. And what's interesting is the new ideas that come out of that. And the fact that the things that we think about as companies when we put our solutions out there are all good, and they're probably the classical examples. But it's just surprising what people do with all these tools that we wouldn't think of in this room because of just how many people are building apps, whether it's through MEAPS, things that cloud services like Catavolt by themselves. And that's really been the amazing thing in the market that we've seen.
So Lee, I'm an enterprise company. I come to you and say, we don't have a mobile strategy. We don't have any mobile apps. Where do we start? What's a good starting point? You know, do we start with our employees? Do we start with our channel? You know, where do you, I'm sure you get this question from time to time.
Yeah, and actually, it's part of we do that as part of the services we do too. But I think you start where the business mobile application need is, and you need to sit down and understand what the needs are and classify your applications. We kind of had a conversation across the team here that there's lots of different needs out there. So there are going to be, you need to understand what kind of applications you're going to need, horizontal and reach needs. George talks a little bit about that. You're going to need those that are going to have rich client experiences, like a CRM that needs to go in and talk to a doctor and be able to flip the instrument or something like that. And then you're going to have things that maybe even need other services like location, APIs that you might get from the network, connections to SAP. So the first thing you need to do is understand your business needs and then classify those applications, because that application classification is going to live with you for the next, and evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. And here's an interesting statistic. 250 CIOs that were surveyed in 2011, only 4% had more than 10 apps. In 2013, those same 250 CIOs predicted that 96% of them would have more than 25 apps. So you gotta understand that dynamic and what those apps mean and who they're going to be able to do that. And there's, with that number of apps, there's plenty of room for everybody. You need to have a plan against that.
Hayden, how would you talk to your customers that, you might already have devices in there and they've got some legacy applications and they want to they want to look at launching something new, where do you get started? You know, do you sell them on the MEAP, or do you build requirements? How do you get started?
Yeah, well, in general, we tend to go in with a partner like Pyramid, and have you guys do most of the heavy lifting. But in general, we let the customer guide the direction of the application development. I would say in most of the times when we do engage customers, they are already our Motorola partners. They're Motorola customers. So the approach with application development is something new that's coming from Motorola. That they know us as hardware providers in the past. So that's a new conversation that we tend to have. We tend to also speak with a different group. In the past, we tended to speak more with the operations type folks. And now when we talk software, we're talking with more marketing types, more of the server developer, the web server developers. So it's a kind of a new paradigm for us, but it gives us new insights into the companies that old companies that we've worked with in the past.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask all of you. I'll start with George. George, I know that you work with little companies, middle-sized companies, large companies. Are you seeing that they have the talent internally? Do these IT shops, what's going on out there when you walk in? Do they have anybody that understands the BlackBerry or the Android or the iOS? Or is there somebody there it's a hobby for them, or do they really have a bench that can handle a lot of this stuff?
Well, everybody's tinkering a little bit. So a lot of companies have developers, and this is the fun stuff. So I'm seeing it kind of as a reward to some development departments to get an iPad and get the software development kit. But to the point that these gentlemen made earlier, there's so much to developing an app for just the iOS, and then you have to support Android and everything. So very quickly we see them going to cross-platform tools like MEAPS. But for smaller companies, what's interesting is their development staff are part of the business. They know the systems they run, like if they run an Oracle, if they're an IBM shop. They know how the production orders get through the line and how inventory goes out, and how it goes out through all the systems, which is really, as I'm sure you guys would agree, that's the hard part when it comes to making an app, because it has to run the business. Whatever line of business apps, or even the mobile to consumer apps, they're business integrated apps is what we're talking about. So what we're seeing that's really good is that people know their business, and when given the proper guidance and tools, they can adapt technology to their business in a way that makes sense for them.
Very well said. How about you, Lee?
Yeah, I think there's two basic models. There's one that is predominantly internal, and then there's the one that is the hybrid, and where they're taking the certain skills, maybe the integration skills on the back end, and then organizing around a COE, which they may fund with a partner, or they may fund partially with a partner themselves, which is all around the mobile dynamic that's out there. So I'd say that both of those models exist, and we do see 15 to 20% of the organizations talking about this thing called the mobile COE now, which is a center of excellence, and they basically combine partners with their internal resources to do it.
What we saw initially, and initially is probably a year and a half ago now, is that we saw some of our existing customers. I think tinkerers is a good word. We saw developers going out there and kind of doing things on their own. But what we saw also is that customers were willing to accept some of the newer devices, the iOS devices, that got them 60, 70% of the way there just because of it was a customer-facing environment. So they wanted to have that sexy device when they went to deal directly with their customers. Right? Even though the apps didn't quite fit the bill and they didn't quite work 100%, it was still worth the effort to go out there and use this hardware. So now with these cross-platform tools that companies like Motorola is coming out with, it helps bridge that gap, take you to 100% where you can actually write applications using HTML5 and access the hardware, capabilities of the hardware of the different devices. Now you find yourself in being able to deliver 100% feature capabilities to these same devices that a year and a half ago you couldn't.
Good segue, and this is the last question I'll ask you guys, and then I'll open it up to the audience. So start thinking about the questions you want to ask our panel. What do you think about HTML5? It's getting a lot of hype right now as the next big thing, and there's one side of the camp that says there won't be apps in the future, everything will be HTML. There's other people that say apps will always exist for certain functions and reasons. So what do you think, Hayden?
Yeah, HTML5 or HTML, right? HTML5 is just the next version of in the progression, the HTML progression. It's going to continue to get better. It's going to continue to become, give you a richer user experience. I think the MEAPS that adopt HTML as its development language are going to continue to exist because like our software, we take advantage of whatever the HTML spec comes out. We act just like a browser. So as the spec continues to get better, we bring those advantages into our development environment. There are certain things that you're just because remember, beyond HTML, you have the browser that has to then implement HTML. All right, so if the spec comes out HTML6 comes out in 2013, it's probably going to be 6 months to a year before you start seeing browsers that take advantage of the new spec, and then even longer before you see mobile browsers take advantage of that spec. So just because the spec advances doesn't mean that you're going to see browser technology keep up with it. Now, the browsers are not focused on the enterprise. Browsers are focused on giving you the ability to browse the internet, and that's kind of their focus. Maybe it'll change in the future, maybe not, but that's their focus. The MEAPS now, they're delivering an application framework where you can take advantage of HTML, but deliver an application that a custom application that suits your particular business need.
Very well said, and just to paraphrase, so for those of you, the whole internet's written on HTML5, and there's Flash and other programs, but so it's written on HTML, not HTML5, but the promise of HTML5 is this ability to write for all cell phones and not have to write iOS code or BlackBerry native code or Android. And when Hayden talks about specs, what he's talking about, to frame it up, is like using the camera on the phone. If you're writing a native app, there's APIs, there's ways to get to that camera, take a picture, upload it to the web. If you're using HTML, that has to be ratified. Those kinds of things, using GPS, using the camera, those sorts of things. And I'm not an expert on HTML, I might have misspoke there, but that gives you an idea of so there's a camp that is really big on HTML. I think there's going to be hybrid apps that'll use both, and it depends on what you're trying to do. What do you think, Lee?
Well, I kind of agree on 2 points, is that it's a standard that will evolve, and it will always be evolving, so you won't be able to take advantage of HTML for everything, for everybody. As the spec moves forward. Those platforms which do adopt the spec will be better off than those platforms that don't. I think that. And then the last one, although I had it fully prepared and it was my primary point of this speech, was a hybrid app, but you just took that. No, I'm just kidding. But I think the reality is that you're not going to know what the app is. In fact, we've written HTML apps that you would swear was a native app, And so I think that there are going to be needs, even within the apps, to have HTML sections and use browser technology within that, and then you're going to have the app themselves that's resident on the phone. And I think those will coexist. And I think they'll coexist long term, because I think the needs are different for those.
What do you think, George?
Well, it's anytime you try to predict technology over time, it's just a tough thing. I know two things for sure. The consumers will decide for us what in the world's going to be fashionable. And you know, we went from BlackBerry to Apple and whatever's going to happen next. Well, the same thing with apps or HTML5 or whatever. Maybe we haven't thought of something that's going to come out. But what the other certainty is they don't care. You know, I don't see consumers worried about whether it's an HTML app or native app. They just use whatever they like. So if you look at some of the studies, I don't have the numbers in my head, but Facebook, Twitter, everybody has a web page. But on mobile devices, right now, it's their mobile apps that they're using, way more than the web. And you know what? At some point, for whatever reason, that could completely flip. And we don't know when, we don't know, so what you could do as a company is insulate yourself from those changes. And I know I'm preaching a lot about it, but you focus on the business and you solve the problem at the business level, and then all the nice, sexy stuff comes and goes. But if you have a nice foundation underneath it, that's not the big deal there. So.
Well said.